Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of textual study of the Quran. This is the fifth session, and in this session, we'll start off with Surah Baqarah, which is, as you would be knowing, the longest surah of the Quran. It is a Madinan surah. It has 286 verses. Prior to this, we have covered Surah Fatiha, and also we talked about some of the salient features of the Farahi approach. This textual study will be based on Al-Bayan, which is Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi's translation, annotated translation of the Quran. We will use the text of Al-Bayan and then, of course, expand on it and try to elaborate some of the points and features that would be helpful in this study. The way we will proceed from Surah Baqarah is that it would be more of an interactive session than a lecture or a delivery from one side. I would like all of you to participate, and the way that we will proceed is that we have been discussing this all along, that one of the very important traits and features of the Quran is that it's like a divine sermonizer. It's a divine oration which has been revealed from the Almighty, and it seems that like a divine orator, it continues to shift back and forth between addressees. So as far as the addressees of the Quran are concerned, we know that they range from the Prophet to, of course, the believers, the hypocrites, the people of the book of those times. And these entities, of course, they are engaged in a dialogue between one another and also in a dialogue with the Almighty. So basically, it's the Almighty having a dialogue with these entities which were found in 7th century Arabia. And precisely for this reason, we will find a lot of localized conversation, because the Almighty, when he talks to the characters that were found in 7th century Arabia, he was talking to them vis-a-vis the beliefs and, of course, their own misguided thoughts. And the reason that they were called to account in this regard was that, especially the people of the book, they were waiting for the final prophet to arrive. They knew from their own scriptures that he would be coming, and therefore the Almighty in the Madinan surahs starts off without any prior introduction, as was the case with the idolaters of Mecca. So in Mecca, we know that the 2/3 of the Quran was revealed in Mecca, and the Meccan period started off in a very gradual way, in which we had phases like warning, enhanced warning, conclusive communication of the truth, then migration and acquittal, and so on and so forth. But in the Madinan chapter, or the Madinan phase of Prophet Muhammad's preaching mission, since primarily it were the people of the book who were addressed, we don't find these stages or phases like warning or enhanced warning, because this was not needed. They were already recipients of previous books, contrary to the idolaters about whom we have been discussing, that the last book that they had was 2,000 years ago, or 2,500 years ago, in fact, the scripture of Abraham, and which existed in oral form. And it was passed down from Prophet Ishmael, and there was no other prophet after Prophet Ishmael until the arrival of Prophet Muhammad. So they were not familiar with a lot of things. They were, of course, familiar with the oral tradition, but a lot had been lost to posterity, and we find that they were in need to be warned once again. So for this reason, the Meccan period is much more elaborate, and we find the phases of Prophet Muhammad's preaching mission to be much more advanced and much more encompassing. In the case of the Madinan surahs, this is not the case, because, as I said, in Madinan surahs, primarily it was the people of the book, because they inhabited Medina mostly. But of course, this doesn't mean that the idolaters did not exist. Yes, they did. For example, the tribes of Aus and Khazraj, they inhabited Medina, and they were the Ishmaelites. So of course, in Medina also they were addressed. But as we have been discussing this, that once the Prophet leaves his own people, where he has conclusively delivered the truth on the central city, which is called al-Qura, it actually means that truth has been communicated to all other cities as well. So even the idolaters who were residing in Medina, they were also delivered the truth, because, of course, as the Prophet had left his own city, and with his arrival in the state of Medina, in the city state of Medina, I would say, they had already been communicated his message, because of the fact that the Quran tells us that it is primarily the central city in which a prophet delivers the truth, and then all people related to those to that area, whether they are slightly far off, that is also delivered to them. So in Medina, now coming back to this Medinan period, Surah Baqarah, which we are going to start off today, was revealed in Medina. It is a pair, it forms a pair with the next surah, which is Surah Al Imran. So Surah Baqarah and Surah Al Imran, they are paired surahs. And one of them, which is Surah Baqarah, the first of them, it delivers the truth conclusively to the Jews. And the other one, which is Surah Al Imran, it delivers the truth conclusively to both the Jews and Christians. But in Surah Al Imran, the deliverance of truth to the Christians or the Nazarenes, it dominates. And at the same time, both surahs also announce the institution of a new ummah from the Ishmaelites, of course, which are the followers of Prophet Muhammad. So, as we shall see in both these surahs, that they go along in such a manner that truth is delivered to these people of the book, and near the end, or near the half of the surah, you'll find that they are deposed from this position, and a new ummah, which is the ummah of Prophet Muhammad, which is the ummah of the Ishmaelites, it is given the reins of religious leadership. So this is how Surah Baqarah proceeds, and as I said, Surah Baqarah is 286 verses, and it's nearly in the half of the surah, which is like verse 140 or so, that you'll find a verse which tells us that now that these Jews have really made a mess of their responsibilities, did not carry out the responsibilities the way they should have, and now that the truth has been delivered to them in an ultimate manner, now they are deposed from this position, and we find the verse which says, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ, addressing the believers, addressing the Ishmaelites, that now the Almighty, with the change in Qibla, with the change of the direction, of course, previously we find that they were praying in the direction of the Baitul Maqdis, but this change occurred in Medina, and the verse announces that just as this change has been made in the Qibla, on a similar basis, now this new ummah is being instituted. So much for the background and introduction to this surah, which of course, as I said, forms a pair with Surah Al Imran. We have discussed this earlier on, that the Quranic surahs, they are organized in 7 chapters, and in each chapter we find a Meccan surah starting off the chapter, and always in every chapter the end is on a Medinan surah. So this is the first chapter of the Quran that we have started to study. Surah Fatiha, which is the first surah of the Quran and also the first surah of this chapter, is the only Meccan surah, and the rest of these 4 surahs, they are all Medinan. And the pairing is that Surah Baqarah is paired with Al Imran, which is Surah number 2 and Surah number 3. And then Surah number 3 and Surah number 4, they are also paired. So Surah number 3 is, Surah number 4 is Nisa, and Surah number 5 is Maida. So 4 and 5 are pairs, and 2 and 3 are pairs. So we will be discussing this paired phenomena as well, because as earlier on, it was pointed out that the way these surahs complement one another, it actually gives us a very deeper view in the Quran. We are able to go to great depths, because these pairs, they continue to complement one another, they continue to supplement one another. There could be something which are found in much more brevity in one surah, and that particular thing is elaborated in the next surah. So coming back now to the study of Surah Baqarah, as I said, our sessions here would be more interactive, and I would expect you to participate during the discussion that we will do on the text of the surah. And the way we will conduct these sessions is that the text would be shown to you in colors, and a change in color will always indicate that there is a change in the addressee. So once the color changes, it should be an indication to people like you who are studying the Quran that now the addressees have changed. It is the dialogue which is being taken place, or the monologue at times also which is taking place, is now shifting to another addressee. So today we will, I think, inshallah, hopefully we'll cover the first 39 verses of this surah. And just to give you an idea, as you can see on your screens, you'll see that the first 20 verses starting off from Surah Alif Lam Mim, and you can see the first 20 verses in Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. they are colored yellow, which signifies that they have a specific addressee. And then right from surah, from verse 31, so 21. So first 20 surahs have one color, and from verse 21 to 39, you'll find another color. And this is the division that we will be studying today. So the yellow color is signifying a specific addressee. And as soon as you move to the green color, you will find that the addressee has changed. And remember, we will be talking about these surahs in the light of Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi's Al-Bayan. So, of course, you can always have a recourse to that, to the translation and his annotations. But I would suggest that when you're studying and when you are concentrating on the class, that it is better to leave aside that his own translation, because we will be using that translation on the screen. And I would like you to train yourselves by applying your mind to the translation, and instead of finding answers, because some of the questions that I might be asking during the course of our study would have answers in his annotations. But I would expect that if you'd like to train yourselves, if you'd like to have an eye and find out how the Farai scholars, they delve deep into the Quran, how they reflect on the Quran, then this is like a training session that you should take. And instead of finding answers from some of the annotations, you try to reflect on the text, which I'm going to read out before you, and then try to answer some of the questions. So this is just a note of caution for those serious students who would really like to train themselves how to reflect and how to go deeper into the study of the Quran vis-a-vis the Farahi approach. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read out the text and translation, of course. So those of you who are able to understand a little bit of Arabic, of course, they can tune themselves. Otherwise, I'm going to translate, of course, and use the translation of Al-Bayan. And the translation is the translation of the translation. So, of course, it's the English translation of the Urdu translation. And we will stop and pause at instances where it is deemed necessary and essential, and then we'll have a discussion. And some of the points that I would like you to keep in your mind also would be brought forth. So, starting off, as you can see, we'll first study the first 20 verses, which are colored yellow, and they are being displayed before you now. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim Zalikal Kitabu La Rayba Fihi Hudan Lil Muttaqin الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون إن الذين كفروا سواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. So I'm going to stop here. These are the first 7 verses. We shall first read the translation. I would request all of you to please concentrate on this translation, because coming up are some questions that I would like to pose before you, so that you have a deeper understanding. So remember, I've just narrated or translated the first 7 verses, and here is the translation. And one thing that you might also note here as we go along is that you can see that the translation is divided into paragraphs as well. So this paragraphing basically is based on Ustaz Amin Islahi's Tadabbur Quran, and Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi has adopted it the way it was, and he has very, very, I would say, scanty differences with his teacher. So if you look up Tadabbur Quran and if you look up Al-Bayan, you'll find the paragraphing being there. And this paragraphing actually, as we have discussed in our very first lecture, it tells us the way we make paragraphs in our own language, in Urdu and in English, that there is a shift in the content, not in the addressee, in the content. So the addressee shift will be indicated by the colors, but the content shift will always be indicated by the paragraph. So when you see a paragraph, it would mean that now the content has gone ahead and there is something which is being added. So it is exactly how we do in our own language. When we write a book, when we write an article, we make paragraphs, and an author knows that when he would like to either break the previous content or the previous topic and subject and add something new to it, or refer back to some of the important point and then make a note of it. The way we do paragraphing, exactly we find Almighty also, I mean, employing this, although we never received the Quran in the form of paragraphs, of course, we received the Quran in the form of verses. But once a scholar reflects on the message of the Quran, it is very discernible that this message is, of course, based on textual shifts. I call them textual shifts. I call them paragraphic shifts. So it's very similar to the way that we, when we write a book, we go forward. Another thing that might be of interest to you to note is that this paragraphing was done by Ustaz Amin and Ahsan Islahi in the 1950s, early 1950s. It was 1951 and 52, and he was incarcerated or imprisoned in Multan jail. So he was there for about a year or so, and he once told us actually that it was during his incarceration, during his imprisonment in the Multan jail, that he got this opportunity to divide the Quran into paragraphs. And of course, the time for writing the tafsir came much later, and he started off in 1957 and 58 when he left the Jamaat-e-Islami, and then he built upon these paragraphs and he started his tafsir. So Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi, I've spoken to him on this issue, and I've also translated all of Al-Bayan, and I can say from my own first-hand experience, and also a translation of the Tadabbur Quran is going on. I can also say that from my first-hand experience that paragraphing is almost similar. I mean, there are differences in a lot of interpretations, but paragraphing is something in which these two authors are extremely similar. Yes, there are some nuanced differences, but as I said, there are very, very few. So the first 6-7 verses, I'm going to read out the translation. This is Surah Alif Lam Mim. This is the book of God. There is no doubt in it being the book of God. It is guidance for these God-fearing who are professing faith without observing, are diligent in the prayer, and are spending for our cause from what we have given them, and who are believing in what was revealed to you and also in what was revealed before you, and have firm conviction in the hereafter. It is these who are guided from their Lord, and it is these who shall succeed. On the other hand, so you see, now there is a shift. On the other hand, those who have decided to reject the book, which means the Quran, of course, it is the same to them, whether you warn them or not. They will not believe. God has now set a seal on their hearts, and on their ears in accordance with his law, and on their eyes is a veil, and on the day of judgment a great torment awaits them. So this brings us to an end of the translation. So as I said, be very attentive while you're reading, while I'm reading out the translation, and you can pick up some of the things that we will be inshallah discussing. Going now back to the remaining verses. So I'm going to read out the remaining verses, as I said. So starting off with verse 8. And among these people are those hypocrites also who say, we have professed faith in God and in the last day, whereas they do not have faith in any of these things. They want to deceive both God and the believers, and in reality, they are only deceiving themselves, but realize it not. In their hearts was the ailment of jealousy. So God has now further increased this ailment of theirs. And because they have been lying, there is a grievous penalty for them. And when it is said to them, do not create disorder in the land by adopting this attitude, they reply, it is we, in fact, who are the reformers. Beware, they are the ones who create disorder, but are not realizing it. And when it is said to them, accept faith as these believers, as these people in front of you have accepted faith, they very conceitedly say, shall we accept faith as these fools accepted faith? Listen, they themselves are fools, but they know not. And I mean, until now you can see how harsh, I would say, or slightly stern is the style and tone when you say that these are fools themselves. I mean, this is not a surah in which there any warning is given or any call to invitation to accept the truth is being given to them. It's like something which has already been done in their previous scriptures, and now the Quran is directly addressing them in a very stern way, because, as I said, they were not people who were to be told what Tawheed is or what hereafter is, because they were recipients of previous books. So the Quran starts off directly with them, and you can see how stern the tone is. So, listen, they themselves are fools, but they know not. And when they meet the believers, they say, we have believed. But when they reach the evil ones in seclusion, they say, we are with you. We are only jesting. How can they jest in reality? God is jesting with them, and according to his law is giving them respite and their rebelliousness, such that they are wandering about. It is they who have given preference to error and guidance. So this deed of theirs has yielded absolutely no profit for them, and neither have they been able to find the way. I'm skipping the Arabic text because this might take longer if I read the text as well. So I'm just going to first now concentrate on the translation and see how you are able to understand it. So please do make note of certain things that you might need to ask questions about. But just to continue, their example, you see now once again, you find a shift. Whenever a person is saying that their example, so he's referring back to the previous groups of people, and then their example is similar to that person who kindled a large fire in a dark night. Then when the fire lighted his surroundings, God took away the light for those whom the fire had been kindled and left them in darkness such that they cannot see anything, deaf, dumb, and blind. Hence they shall now never return. Or is such that it is raining from the sky, in it are dark clouds and thunder and lightning also. From the fear of death, because of thunder, they are trying to insert their fingers in their ears. Whereas God has encompassed such rejectors from all sides. The lightning all but snatches away their sight. When it lights up on them, they walk a little in it, and when darkness descends upon them, they stand still. If God willed, he could have taken away their hearing and the sight as well. Indeed, God has power over all things. So this brings us to an end to the first section, in which you find the color is yellow, and now there is a shift. So we will also now read the translation of that shift. And remember, as I said, a shift always signifies, the color shift always signifies a change in addressee. Now the addressee is changing. Why do you ruin yourselves by following them? Now you need to understand that this is a shift, and we will come back to it, that what exactly is the nature of this shift. And I might ask this question to you, that how would you designate this shift as to who are the people who are now addressed. So be more attentive. So why do you ruin yourselves by following them? O people, serve the Lord who has created you and those before you too, so that you may be secure from his punishment. He who has made the earth a flooring for you, and the sky a roof, and has sent down water from the sky, then has brought forth from it various kinds of fruits for your sustenance. So do not set up rivals with God. So you see, each and every verse and sentence is signifying something. I mean, it relates to the beliefs of the entity who is being addressed. So when I ask you this question, which I'm going to ask you just in a short time, that how would you account for the change of addressees, and which addressee is now under discussion, you have to pick this up from the text itself, and the text is very vocal. So do not set up rivals with God, even though you know all this. This is what this book calls to: accept it. And if you are in doubt about what we have revealed to our servant, of course referring to the prophet, then go and produce a single surah like it. And for this purpose also call your leaders besides God, if you are truthful in this claim of yours. Then if you are not able to do it, and surely you cannot, then fear the fire whose fuel is those people who do not believe, and those stones of theirs too, which they worship. It has been prepared for these disbelievers. And O prophet, give glad tidings to those who professed faith in this book and did righteous deeds, that for them are orchards beneath which rivers will be flowing. Whenever they are fed with any of their fruits, they will say, this is the same as what we were fed with before, whereas they will be given something similar to it. And they will have pure wives there, and they will abide in them forever. In them, referring to the orchards. This is a similitude of paradise. Similitude refers to a parable. God is not embarrassed to cite the similitude of a mosquito or something even more inferior in order to explain a reality. Then those who believe know that it is the truth that has come from their Lord, and those who disbelieve say, what does God mean by this example? In this way, God misleads many by it, and many he leads to the right path by it. And in reality, he only misleads by it the rebellious who break God's covenant after making it, and who sever what God has directed to join, and in this manner spread disorder in the land. It is these who are in loss, both in this world and in that to come. So the address is continuing. The addressee has not changed. And as you can see, the content one after the other is a very stern, in a very stern tone, is addressing the Jews, and it's telling them that, look, what you are doing. I mean, I'm talking about the whole surah, but in between the whole surah, you can see that the addressees, they tend to shift, and of course, the content shifts with them. O people, how can you deny God, whereas you were dead? Then he gave you life. Then it is he who gives death to you. Then after this, he only shall give life. Then towards him shall you be returned. It is he who created you for all things of the earth. And he turned to the sky and made 7 skies, and he is aware of all things. Ask them, O prophet, how do they become rejectors? And in order to make them understand our scheme regarding this world, narrate to them the incident when your Lord said to the angels, I am going to bring into existence a creation in this earth that will be given its sovereignty. They said, you will bring forth in it a creation that will spread disorder in it and shed blood. And on the other hand, such are we, that while praising you, we are glorifying and sanctifying you. He said, I know what you know not. And in order to make them understand, he taught Adam all the names. Then he brought forth the angels, brought forth before the angels those people whose names had been taught to Adam. Then said, inform me of the names of these people if you are truthful in this notion of yours. They said, you are devoid of all flaws. I mean, of course, these are the angels answering. They said, you are devoid of all flaws. Of knowledge we have none except what you have taught us. In truth, it is you who have knowledge and wisdom. He said, Adam, tell them the names of these people. Then when he had introduced them to the angels, God said, did I not tell you that I know the secrets of the heavens and the earth, and I know what you are revealing and what you are concealing? And then the last paragraph, and to understand the trial of human beings in our scheme, also narrate to them the incident when we asked the angels to bow down to Adam. Then all of them bowed except Iblis. He refused and showed arrogance, and in this manner became among the rejectors. And we said, Adam, dwell you and your wife in this orchard and eat freely in it from wherever you will want to. But both of you, however, should not go near this tree, otherwise you will become transgressors. Then Satan made them slip from there and had them turned out from the state they were in. And we said, get down from here, now you are enemies of one another, and you will have to stay on earth until a specified time and benefit from its provisions. Then Adam learned from his Lord some words of repentance, and then repented through them. At this he showed favor to him, meaning that God showed favor to him and pardoned him. Indeed, he alone is very forgiving, ever merciful. We said, get down from here, all of you. Then if ever comes to you any guidance from me, follow it, because those who follow this guidance of mine, their reward is paradise. So there they shall neither have any fear, nor shall they grieve. And those who rejected it and belied our revelations, they are companions of the fire. They shall abide in it forever. So you see, this brings us to an end of the section that we're going to study today. I have gone through it so that you can have an idea of what is being discussed, and I'm sure you must have understood. So my question now to you, and any one of you can answer, is that during this narration of translation, were you able to pick up that who the addressee is in the first section, which is colored yellow, and whatever you say has to be supported by arguments, and who exactly is the addressee, which is colored green, and which starts off with verse 21 and continues right up to verse 39. And again, I would like to hear the answer being reinforced by your own arguments, so that you can tell us that why, or tell me that why, who exactly is the addressee here, and what makes you think that the addressee that you have pinpointed is the addressee that actually these verses are addressing. So the first question directed to any one of you who would answer that, please educate us that as far as these first 20 verses are concerned, who is the addressee of these 20 verses? So any one of you?
I see a raised hand from Baran Nashir.
Okay.
Baran Nashir, please.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. So I think the first 20 verses talked about the believers that already believed in Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because God talked in general about the way of the believers, that they pray, give zakat, and then he talked about the disbelievers as well, that they will be that they are
I mean, this is what the Quran is actually narrating. So I'm not asking about the narration or the people who are under discussion. So Baran, you might not have attended some of the earliest sessions that we have been discussing. The Quran is addressing, it's talking to a certain entity here, and it's right in front of us. I mean, just go through the first two paragraphs and you'll find that there is an addressee to which this whole paragraph or this yellow colored section is being addressed. It's sitting right there. I mean, you have to see that God is talking to someone. So when you're answering by telling me that, well, the Jews are being under discussion and some of their attributes are related here, and the believers their attributes are related here, of course they are, because when you say that these are the people who believe in the earlier books and these are the people who spend in God's way and they have conviction in the hereafter, this is a narration. It's not an address. When I say address, it means that there is a pinpointed entity to which God is talking.
Okay, then I think I should maybe someone else to answer.
Okay, can we have some other person trying this out, please? Anyone else?
Naveed, Irfan, do you want to give it a go?
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम जी मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है कि यहाँ जो मुखातिब है मुसलमान हैं उनसे बात कही जा रही है.
No. Actually, you see, once again, let me first pinpoint the question. It's not that you have to say that Muslims are being addressed here. You have to verify. I mean, these Muslims are talking to one another. There is no direct address being involved here. You see, there is a difference between narration and there is a difference between addressing someone. So when you're saying that Muslims are being talked about here, yes, they are being talked about here, but they're not being addressed. So please make this distinction, that there is one thing in which God is addressing someone, and then there is another thing in which God is narrating something. So the narration is about Muslims. Of course, in the first paragraph, you'll find these verses that it is a guidance for the muttaqeen, for the God-fearing who are professing faith without observing, yuminuna bil ghaib. So this is a narration. I mean, God is narrating this. And it's not an address. It's not some that these verses don't tell us that to whom they are addressed. However, there is a strong indication, if I may tell you, in both the first paragraph and the second paragraph, which tells us that who is being addressed here.
इंसान हैं, सभी इंसान हैं.
That's not possible.
I can try it.
You see, I have been discussing this, that the Quran never ever does that expresses all human beings. It's always some entity in front.
Akram Bhatti, you want to give it a try?
Yeah, I think addresses Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Allah Ta'ala is telling, because in Surah 4, Ayah 4, Allah says, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ. So it looks like he's addressing Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, telling him that I have revealed the book to you, just like I had revealed the book to the earlier messengers. I think addresses Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Absolutely. This is the correct answer. You see, the address is always by a pronoun in which someone is being right in front of you. So the words وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِنْ قَبْلِكَ, it's addressing the Prophet, and it tells him that these are the believers who profess faith in what was revealed to you, which is the Quran, and what was revealed before the Quran. I mean, so the Almighty is actually addressing Prophet Muhammad. And Akram Saab, can you also, because there are other indications as well, do you find any other indication which reinforces this observation? Look at the second paragraph.
Yes, it's, I don't have paragraphs in front of me. I have the, okay. Unless keep telling them about Allah keep telling Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, look at these people who don't listen, who don't see, and we have put Rishava, we have put curtains.
No, I mean, you see, Akram Saab, we have to be more pinpointed. You see, one of the principles of the Farai school is that you have to pick up the word. I mean, it's not a general sentence. Can you point to any word? For example, you pointed to this word.
Yes, Allah is telling them, look at these people who,
Who is being addressed here?
No, these are the mushriks. These are the Jews who are being addressed here.
No, the Jews are not addressed. Remember one thing that I told you.
Addressing Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
That the color is. I mean, unless the color changes, the address is not going to change. So, yes, it is Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But can you find something in the second paragraph?
Or
yes,
on the
please.
other hand, those who have decided.
Can I come in,
yes,
sir?
Yes, who is the?
Naushad Shafkat. Sir, I think Inna Ladina Kafaru wa Sawaun alayhim anzartum ablam tunzarhum la yuminu. There are those to whom you preach, there is no use in preaching to them because they have not believed and they are not going to believe even if you are going to preach to them. उनके लिए बराबर है कि तुम उन्हें खबरदार करो या न करो. I think this is the translation.
Who is tum? Who is tum?
This is the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is the Prophet.
Yes. That is the answer. That is the answer that I was looking for. You see?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You can see the cursor. The cursor is the same whether you warn them or not. They will not believe. So it's you which is Prophet Muhammad. And similarly, if you look at the first paragraph, you'll see that those. I mean, you can see the cursor which is on the third line, and who are believing in what was revealed to you, yes. Which is, I mean, it's not me, it's not the Jews, it's not the Christians, it's not the hypocrites, it's not the Muslims, it's the Prophet. What was before, and it says that what was revealed to you, look at the cursor, and also what was revealed before you.
Before you, right.
Yeah. So you see, this whole tells us, the section tells us that now, as soon as the Quran has begun, effectively from Surah Baqarah, the Prophet is right there in front of the Almighty, and there is a note of assurance being sounded to him. And generally, when this note of assurance is sounded to him, you'll find such pronouns occurring frequently in which the word "you" is used, and you'll find that it generally relates to the Prophet. Now, my third question to people who are present here is that I just talked about the fact that the surah addresses the Jews in general. I mean, they are the people to whom the conclusive communication of the truth is being mentioned, or they are being delivered. So if the Jews are the addressees of Surah Baqarah in general, how come we find the Prophet being addressed here? So how do these two statements reconcile? But I'm not going to expect an answer right now. Let's defer this. And the next question that I'd like any of you to answer is that now we come to the green part. So once you answer this green part, it will be easier for you to answer this question, that why is it that when we say that the surah addresses the Jews, and suddenly there is a part which addresses the Prophet, and now of course the green part, which one of you would need to answer, which addressees are specifically under discussion. So again, as I said, this is an area that you need to reflect from within the text. There are indications within the text which tell you that now there is a new addressee, and with the new addressee, the content has shifted. And now as the content has shifted, you'll also realize that this shift in content changes the whole scenario. So remember this series that I taught you regarding understanding the Quran, in which I said that it's like not a very good example, not a very good comparison, but it's like an earthly comparison. In plays and in dramas, where when you read a play like a Shakespearean play or a play of any other playwright, you'll find Act 1, Scene 1, Act 2, Scene 2, and with the change of act, with the change of scene, you'll see people changing and you'll see the content changing. It's exactly like this, except that the name of the person who's being addressed is not. I mean, it's not, unless you reflect on the text, it's not going to become evident to you. When we write plays and dramas and scripts, like in our human plane, we always mention that who is speaking to whom. So, for example, every single human drama or play would have this caption which would tell us that, well, look, this is the person now is speaking and this is what he has uttered. And the next person, the name of that person would also be given in margins. But as I said, this is not the case with the Quran. And this is also a slightly challenging thing for advanced students of the Quran to now try to decipher who this color is. So I have made this easier for you so that you are able to understand that the shift occurs from verse 21. But if any one of you can answer this question, that who are the addressees of this green portion? Remember, it started off with verse 21. It goes on right up to verse 39. So who exactly are the addressees? And when you answer this question, the answer lies within the text, because you see the people who are as addressees, they have certain beliefs, they have certain views, and a person who knows their beliefs and views, for example, the idolaters will have some different views. Similarly, the people of the book, and amongst them Christians and Jews, will have different views. So by picking up the paragraph in a way that you are able to analyze that who exactly is the feature regarding the views that we are discussing that we can relate to, you can immediately come to the person or the group of people who are being addressed here. So if you would like a couple of minutes, you can just read this paragraph once again in your heart, starting off this section, in fact, from Surah verse 21 to 39, and let's see if any one of you can pinpoint that what is the shift in address.
We got 4 raised hands, so I'll just call out Mubashir. Do you want to give it a try?
Yes, please.
I think the idolaters are addresses of these verses, especially where it is said that they and their stones will be punished in the hell.
Okay, so anyone else?
I think
yes.
I think the addresses are the Jews of Medina, because it says this is what this book calls to, accept it, which indicates that there's like a new book, so their previous book is like not valid anymore. And then fear, and it also says like if you're then fear the fire whose fuel is those people also, so also indicates like others who do not believe, and those stones of theirs too. So I think the mushrikeen are also indirectly addressed to the Jews, like you will be just like them. This is
so Baran, if I understood you correctly, you are saying that basically the addressees are the Jews, and in between addressing the Jews, the idolaters have also been addressed.
Yes, so
that's so.
Yeah, they are compared.
But as I said, I mean, you have to understand that I have not changed the color, which would mean that the addressees have remained the same. And this is one hint that you should get, that there are not multiple addressees.
No,
so there has to be.
I meant like that they are compared, that the Jews of Medina are still the addressees, but they are being compared to the mushrikeen. So they cannot be the addressees at the same time.
This could not be possible. You see, look at the first verse. Oh, people, serve your Lord. I mean, this is like a direct address. And the Arabic word for serve is worship your Lord. And look at the part which says, do not set up rivals with God, which means do not set up partners with God. So were the Jews setting up partners, or were the idolaters setting up partners?
The idolaters.
Okay. So do we have any other contenders?
So the mushrikeen of Mecca are being addressed because it is telling, number one, first it starts off with telling them, oh people, and then telling them that you are supposed to be, they're warning them about not associating anyone else with God. And it is God who has created heaven and hell for them if they do not believe, and they should continue to believe in the books, in the prophet who is before them, so that they are spared from the punishment of the hereafter.
okay, so in your opinion, the idolaters of Mecca are being addressed, okay? And you have put forth some of the reasoning as well, which these verses clearly say. Any other person who'd like to
I can give it a try.
and answer?
I can give it a try.
Okay, please do.
Can I give it a try?
Yes, Akram Saab, please go ahead.
I think the addressees are mushriks and idolaters, because here Allah says, first it says Allah challenges them to bring a surah like that, or one surah like that, and it says on ayah number 24, فَإِلَّمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَنْ تَفْعَلُوا فَاتَّقُوا النَّارَ الَّتِي وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةُ أُعِدَّتْ لِلْكَافِرِينَ. So यहाँ पर Allah is addressing the idolaters, because they are the one who are worshipping the stones and the idols and all that. And before that, it was
okay. So the four of you have given different answers. We have four answers. So we find one answer is that the idolaters are being addressed here. The second answer is that the Jews are being addressed here. The third answer is that the idolaters of Mecca, not all of Arabia, are being addressed here. And your answer is idolaters once again. Now there is something which is missing in all these four answers, and that is that this surah is a Medinan surah. It's not a Meccan surah. So, I mean, first, okay, we will rule out the fact that the Jews are not being addressed here, because it's very simple. I mean, all these verses, if you go along, they'll starting off with the fact that, I mean, look at the first brackets, which tells you that how the Jews, they were influencing the people of the Quraysh, or the idolaters, and says, why do you ruin yourselves by following them? These people. So following whom? Remember, the Jews were addressed first. So now what is being done is that these Jews were actually influencing some other people. So this very first sentence should tell you that the Jews are not being addressed here, because some other entity is being told that you are ruining yourselves by following the Jews, which were addressed in the previous part, which is the first 20 verses. So therefore now there is a definite shift, and that shift tells us that it cannot be the Jews, because the Jews are being an example of. And secondly, it says that the words that are being said here are فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا, that do not set up partners with God. So I mean, the very first paragraph would clearly suggest that the hypocrites, I mean, neither the hypocrites are being addressed nor the Jews are being addressed. It is the idolaters who are being addressed. So the answers which are given by some of you regarding the idolaters is a partially correct answer. But then some of you said that they relate to the idolaters of Mecca. That is not a correct answer, because this is a surah which was revealed in Medina, and a Medinan surah can only address people who are living in Medina. So can any one of you now modify your answer and let us know that who are these idolaters?
Al-Kitab, Christians.
No, idolaters are not Christians. They are the people of the book. So please don't get confused. Christians and Jews are not idolaters. Idolaters are the mushrikun, the Ishmaelites. Remember, the idolaters of
believers.
I mean,
Sir,
this particular.
The mushrikeen
it cannot be the believers.
Sir, it's the believers.
It says partners of mushrikeen.
That you are correct, as I said. Yes, who's the lady here? Could you please?
Mushrikeen of Medina.
Yeah.
So that is the correct answer. So you see, the cardinal mistake must not be made that when you are looking at a Medinan surah, you cannot change the addressee. I mean, because as I said, the Quran is a book of dialogue. It is talking to someone. God is talking to people who are right there. So how could a Medinan surah, which is being addressed to entities which live in Medina, go to a Meccan entity? And the reason that I'm iterating it here and reiterating here is that this is one of the most fundamental, I would say, and distinctive features of the Farai scholars, that they first of all pinpoint who the addressees are from within the text. And this is the key to understanding the coherence as well as some of the in-depth meaning the paragraph that we are going to study. So I'm going to wind up my today's talk here because we have in this brief time first made this issue out of air. I've tried to set your mental abilities in the direction that you need to, first of all, whenever you study the Quran, pick up the addresses. So unless you are clear about the addresses, the interpretation that you're going to make is liable to a lot of errors if the addressee which is determined is incorrect. So the first thing that whenever you pick up any surah is that analyze the surah vis-a-vis the contents. And the question which is pending here, and maybe in the next session, inshallah, next Sunday, I'll answer that if this particular section, which is from 21 to 39, the addressees are the idolaters of Medina. And in the first 20 verses, the addressee is in fact Prophet Muhammad. So we have Prophet Muhammad, we have the idolaters of Medina. So where are the Jews? Remember, the surah is addressing the Jews. So why is it that we say that surah is addressing the Jews, whereas in the first 39 verses, we don't find a single address? I mean, we don't find the Jews being discussed as an addressee. Of course, they are addressed in a tangential manner, but they are not, I mean, being spoken to the way the Prophet is spoken to here, and the way the idolaters of Medina are being spoken to here by directly addressing them. So we'll leave this to the next session, inshallah. But summing up what we have tried to reach today is that those of you who would like to really go and delve deep down in the Quranic approach of Farai scholars, this is how we will proceed. That in first of all, we'll try to determine the addressees of the verses that are under question, and then we'll look at the verses in detail. So we've not finished with these 39 verses. We've done just the first part, and that is to determine the addressee. Next comes some of the individual details that need to be explained within the paragraphs and within the content that we have studied. So my suggestion to all of you who are serious in studying the Quran would be that before you come next week, please look at this content that we have studied today. Take a deeper look into it, and next we'll study some of the questions that arise because of the change in addressee, and of course some of the individual details that these verses express. So now we can have any questions that you might have in mind.
Dr. Saleem, I felt from the beginning that it was the mushrikeen, and because it was addressed, and this because this surah was revealed to the Prophet in Medina, I did not specifically say that it was mushrikeen of Medina, but it's very obvious. But of course, because there it says in one green section, and I don't have it in front of me, that the hellfire about the, yeah, if you can just put that in front of me, or yeah, yeah, and you call your leaders besides you, not this one, the green one. Yeah, this is what the one before it. This is what this book calls to accept it. And if you are in doubt about this, we have revealed to our servants. Then I go and do a single surah like it. And for this purpose, I also call to your leaders besides God. If you are truthful in this claim of yours, then if you are not able to do it, and surely you cannot, then fear the fire whose fuel is those people who do not believe, and those stones in theirs to which they worship. Yeah.
So clearly these cannot be the Jews. So you see, one thing is absolutely evident, that they're not the Jews. So they are the idolaters, and then so remember, the beliefs of the idolaters of Medina and Mecca, they were not different, but the entities are different. So I mean, a Pakistani living in Quetta and a Pakistani living in Rawalpindi is still a Pakistani, but he's living in two separate cities. Similarly, idolaters of Mecca and idolaters of Medina, they profess the same views. They were idolaters, but the only thing is that now the Quran, which is in Medina, the Prophet is now migrated to Medina. He's no longer addressing the people who lived in Mecca. So remember, the Aus and Khazraj tribes, they are the Ishmaelites, and they were the tribes who had accepted faith, a very vast majority of them, when the Prophet was migrating to Medina. And it was because of their support that the Prophet was actually installed as the ruler of Medina. So it was the Aus and Khazraj who were the idolaters, who were the Bani Ishmael, who were the Ishmaelites. They had strong ties with the Jews of Medina as well. So it was because of the Aus and Khazraj and the Jewish tribes in Medina, as a result of the treaty that was made, which is called the Misaq of Medina, that the Prophet was actually installed as the ruler of the state of Medina. And this happened because of the presence of the Aus and Khazraj. So they were idolaters. But as I said, many of them had converted while the Prophet was migrating from Mecca to Medina.
Were they praying to the same idol, the Mushrikeen of Medina and the Mushrikeen of Makkah, or they had different idols?
Yes, they were tribes. So each tribe had its own idol. And we know that there were about roughly more than 300 idols that were placed within the precincts of the Kaaba. And every tribe, there were some common idols, but every tribe would have a different idol as well.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for that clarity.
Now, Shad Chakra, please go ahead and ask your question.
Dr. More than a question, I would like to express my gratitude, I think, on behalf of all of us, for an excellent idea that you come forward and this interactive session. Just wondering, sir, that the words in Ghamidi Saab's Urdu translation is कि शैतान ने वहां से उन्हें फुसला दिया या फिसला दिया, because you have translated it as made them slip from there. Now, probably he led them astray would, to my mind, be a better understanding of it.
Well, you see, this is something which can always be discussed and data, and you could be right, someone other could be right as well. So remember, we at the moment are not discussing the features or the nature of the translation itself. This could be a discussion that you can have with me separately. But for the purpose of ease in the class, we have to stick to a text. And whether the text has been translated correctly or there could be a improvement in that text, that is always a possibility. And you can always send me your suggestions and I'll definitely look into them, and maybe the next editions I would also rectify them. But for the purpose of our class, I mean, I would request you to concentrate more on the addresses, the content of these verses, as well as to understand in depth how the Quran, in spite of being such a localized scripture, still holds a gripping message for each and every one of us.
My apologies, sir. My apologies.
That's it's perfectly okay.
Sir, may I say something?
Sure.
Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, the green part of the text starts with this line, Ya yun nasu budu
Yes. Right.
Rabbukum. That means that this is addressed to the believers. And then for whom who have been created by their Rabb and all those who were before them, and they fear, so that they fear their God. And then
if this green section addresses the believers, let me just interject a little.
It is the believers.
Then how is it true that?
But they have not that. They don't have that very strong faith, because in the third section it says, "Wa in kuntum fi rabin mimma anzalna ala abdina." And if you don't have that strong faith which I have given to whatever I have given to the Prophet, to my Prophet, then you should bring something like that. So it means that they were believers. These were addressed to the believers, but their faith wasn't that strong yet, and they were still under the influence of those people around them who were trying to, take it away from whatever they were.
So anyone who would like to answer this objection or this new view which has been put forth by is it Apa Ruhi?
Ruhi, yes.
Okay, so can any one of you answer this, or any one of you can comment on what she has said? Because she said that green portion actually addresses the believers who are weak in faith, and it does not address the idolaters.
Whose
Anyone?
faith is slipping by.
I could try. So I don't think it's addressing just weak believers, because it says that وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا إِن كُنتُم what was it? وَلَا تَجْعَلُوا مَعَ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. Because it's saying don't set up rivals with God. It couldn't be weak believers, because they'd have belief, but they wouldn't be associating another entity with God. That's why I don't think it's weak believers.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay.
In ayat 22, Allah Ta'ala says that you are setting up, partners with me, and believers would not do that. And then it says that because you are setting up your idols against me, I will put through you and your idols in Jahannam. So that's why it cannot be believers. It says idolaters.
So, Ruhi ma'am, can you understand what these answers say to you? I mean, they tell you that
from my hand, and I couldn't listen to what was the answer.
Okay, then maybe definitely you can do it later on, because the answers that were given here is that when the Quran says that do not set up partners with God, do not worship other deities besides God, and when the Quran says that fear the fire whose people are those who do not believe, and the stones which they worship, referring to their idols. So how can these verses address Muslims? Because of course Muslims, they never indulged in polytheism. They were, either they were monotheists or not. So these verses actually, according to some of the the participants here, they are a big hindrance in accepting the fact that Muslims are being, or believers are being addressed. Okay, one more thing that I'd like to point out here is look at the text of the Quran, which I've just translated as Ya Ayyuhan Nas, which means it's not all mankind. Remember, one of the things which happens in Urdu and English translations, if you look at the Quran, you'll find that the word An-Nas, as we know, the word An-Nas is also found in Urdu. It means generally people or mankind. And you'll find Urdu and English translators addressing, they interpret this word to mean that as if the Quran is addressing all the people of the world, because An-Nas, of course, would mean people. So remember, there is this thing that we have to always understand, that the word An-Nas is appended with an alif lam. So it's not Nas, it is An-Nas, the people. And when alif lam comes with a word, it gives it a specific connotation. Just as the English word the adds a certain specification to the person who is coming after that word. That person, this person. When I say that person, I'm not referring to all people. Or for example, when I say those people. So the word alif lam is generally not translated in our Urdu and English translations, and which gives us, a very, very general view of the Quran, and a very erroneous one, because invariably it ends up as saying that all people. So remember, when you have this alif lam, which is al-nas, on nas, it actually creates a category within mankind. It's a subcategory. So an-nas is not all mankind, is a part of mankind. Now look at the translation.
Sir, actually,
those
I
who
was
are being addressed
by the word Ebudu, which is after an-nas. I thought it means the
so
people.
See, Obudu is something which is So even in this translation, as you can see, that our teacher Ghamidi Sahab has not specified it. So look at his translation. He says, why do you ruin yourself by following them? O people, serve your Lord who has created you and those before you. So if you look at Ustaz Ghamidi's Al-Bayan, you'll find that even in the translation, he has not, my observation here would be, we've discussed this with him as well, that he could have made a slightly different translation in which this nuanced part that, it's not at O people, because this, if you look at the Urdu translation of Al-Bayan, it would say logo. And once again, the word logo, air log, it all, I mean, comes to our mind that maybe all the people are being addressed. So what he has done is that he has translated this in a general word, which is like "O people" or "air logo," but in his annotation underneath the translation, he has said that the word logo or annas is not referring to all people, but is referring to the idolaters of Medina. So he has made this distinction in the annotation part, which is like the annotation below the translation. And if you are going to read just the translation of the Quran, which is without the annotation, of course, the Al-Bayan has been published without the annotations as well. So you just have the translation. So this is going to be a test case for a lot of people, and they would interpret this to mean generally that all people are being addressed. So my contention here would be that a different word should be used here, or a slightly modified version should be used here, in which from the very text of the translation you are able to understand that it's not all the people who are being addressed. It is the idolaters of Medina who are being addressed. I have not come up with a word or a part here that I could say, but I'm just presenting my own observation that if you use the word "O people" the way Ustaz Ghamidi has used here, and which the rest of the translators also use, then there's bound to be this confusion, especially people who are not reading the Hawashi or the annotations. And if just reading the translation, they might get this notion that all people are being addressed. So therefore, I think that this needs our more deliberation and reflection, that this word has to be modified so that our own mind does not jump to the fact that every single person is being implied.
It's a group of people who are being addressed here, right? Sir?
The group of people who are being addressed are the idolaters of so perhaps if the translation is something to the effect, "O idolaters of Medina," I think if the word "annas" is translated as "O idolaters of Medina," it would be perfectly okay. Otherwise, if you translate it as "O people" or "air logo," it's going to cause the same confusion in the minds of people, especially when they don't have the tafsir in front of them, that they will think that every single person is being addressed.
Let's move on. Mariam, you got a question?
Yes, thanks, Fadl. Dr. Saleem, since you said that Prophet Muhammad became the leader of Medina, were all the remaining idolaters in Medina then, like, immediately, did they become all hypocrites, or were there still some that, said that they were idolaters and, didn't act with hypocrisy?
No, they were all idolaters. I mean, there were some hypocrites amongst them as well, but mostly they were from the Jews. As you can see, as we will see when we study the details of the text or the content that we read out today. But as far as the idolaters of Medina are concerned, they were, they declared themselves to be so. It's not that they were hypocrites in any way. And as I also said, that many of them had actually ended up converting into Islam. So a very large tribe, part of the tribes of Aus and Khazraj, which were the idolaters of Medina, they had started to convert because their leaders, Sa'd bin Ubadah and Sa'd bin Mu'az, these are the two leaders of Aus and Khazraj tribes. Actually, when the Prophet had gone to the city of Aqaba, which was when he was in Mecca in the 12th and 13th year of his stay in Mecca, he had gone to Aqaba, and they were at that time. You will find that there was Sa'd bin Mu'az and Sa'd bin Ubadah, the two leaders of Aus and Khazraj. They had converted, and because of the conversion of these leaders, the rest of the tribes, they converted speedily. But then, as I said, whatever the speed, there was still a substantial number of idolaters that still existed amongst the Aus and Khazraj tribes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saleem.
Baran, Nashur, please go ahead.
Sir, my question is about the second part of this green text in front of us, because the green color has not changed, so that means the addresses are the same. But in the second half, it says, "O Prophet, give glad tidings to those who profess faith in this book and did righteous deed," and so forth. But while the addresses have not changed, it seems like God is addressing the Prophet here again. So how should I see this?
Which part? Which verse are you referring to? Which number?
I think it was 23 to 25. Like it's the second part of this screen in front of us with the green text.
So look at you. It says this is what this book calls to accept it, which means what it says is the idolaters are being told that look, the Prophet has come to you. He's now migrated to Medina, and there's a book which has been revealed to him, and you are not accepting it, in spite of the fact that he has spent 13 years with your brethren in Mecca who are also idolaters, and they were conveyed the truth in their ultimate form. And as a result, you were also conveyed. Now that I've come to your city, why are you still dilly-dallying? And it says that if you have any doubt about what we have revealed to our servant, then go and produce a single surah like it. So you'll study, and we'll discuss this in the next session as well, that this challenge, wherever the challenge has been presented, it has always been presented to the idolaters. Not once in the Quran has the challenge of producing another surah like the Quran or another Quran like the Quran has ever been addressed to the people of the book, because they already had a book. So basically it was the idolaters who were objecting that how can a person who is illiterate, how can a person produce like a book like it? And they would say that he has jinn and evil spirits at his disposal who inspire him with this book. So they were always, I mean, in a state of complaint. I mean, they would not accept it. So basically this acceptance is once again towards the idolaters of Medina.
Yes, but I was also talking about the very last part, that where God seems like to talk, like address the Prophet directly. So not the idolaters anymore, but like directly to, "Oh Prophet, give glad tidings to those."
Okay.
But that means the addressee would have been changed.
Okay. Look at this. It says it has been prepared for these very disbelievers, and the Prophet gave glad tidings. So this is just this is like an interjection within the main addressee. So you see, remember the Prophet is addressed in the first part, which is like the first 20 verses, and now the address has shifted within that first part to a new addressee, which are the idolaters. And within that address, because those idolaters were right there, so there is just a small verse which is like an interjection within that main address in which the Prophet is being told to convey certain glad tidings. So, I mean, we do not call this to be a shift in address, which is what we call it, that it is within that particular chunk, we have an interjection from the Prophet. So technically we use the word interjection for this, and for it to be classified as a shift in address, this needed to be continued in later verses as well. So just like a small thing, like an insertion within the big address, that the Prophet is being told that you give glad tidings to them. So, I mean, it's not like a major shift in which a whole section is now being changed. It's like an interjection between that main category that could have caused this. So yes, this is, thank you for bringing this up, and so that I could have explained it. This does not classify to be a change in address, I would say. What it classifies is that it's like an interjection between that main address.
Okay, no, thank you very much.
Imran, please go ahead, unmute your mic and ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Barakallah fiqh, mashallah. It's a very good discussion indeed. I have a quick question about the ayah 22nd, where it says, "Alladhi ja'ala lakum al-ardha firashan." Where it ends, it says, "Fala taj'alu lillahi andadan wa antum ta'lamun." So do not attribute or make any partners to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, only if you knew. So this challenge, is it for the the mushrikun of Medina specifically, or is it a universal challenge? Because we hear these days, of course, there are challenges in different parts of the Quran, similar challenges, which keeps going down to 3 verses, from the whole surah, down to 3 verses eventually. But the lot of people who are the da'i in Islam, and they're using these verses to challenge people these days who don't even know Arabic. So from what we learned today, it seems like this challenge is only for the idolaters of Medina. And then who is to decide? Absolutely. Who is to decide that they would come up with a verse? Because they can make up a verse and say, like, especially these days, Orientalists in the West, in the US in particular and stuff, they can make up anything and say, oh, look, our verse is pretty good, but they don't have the same Arabic background of the, you know, the Arabic of the Jahiliyyah and all that stuff. So just wanted to
we're going to discuss this. So the challenge which the Quran has made, as I said, it has been made on 3 occasions in the Quran. This is one of them. There are 2 other occasions, and if you look up the verses, the other 2 instances, you'll find that both these instances, besides this one, is addressed to the idolaters. At no place are the Jews addressed or the Christians addressed. So whenever there's a challenge of producing a book like the Quran, or a couple of surahs like the Quran, or 10 surahs as one of the cases, they are always the idolaters, because you see, they contended that the Quran has been concocted by the Prophet himself, and for this he has used the jinn folk and evil spirits to do so, and some other people as well. So they are being posed this, that look, he has spent a whole lifetime in front of you. Faqad labistu fikum umara are the words in Surah Hud, which tells them that, look, I have been amongst you for 40 years, and in these 40 years I have not been a person who has produced or authored books, and how is it that suddenly I've come up in my 40th year with such a book? So you see, at every instance you'll find that the idolaters are being addressed, and they are being told that you have to produce a surah like the Quran. And the other thing, Imran, that I'd like to point out here is that every single person has understood these verses to mean that they have to make something like the Quran, and this is not what the Quran is telling them. So what people have come up is that they actually make verses like the Quran in Arabic, and then they say, like, look at this Arabic, it's as good as the Quran. This is not what the Quran's challenge is actually. The Quran's challenge is that produce something like it, which means something similar, not exactly the same, which has the same content, it speaks with the same authority, it speaks in a way that it doesn't have any discrepancy, which the Quran calls about himself or tells about himself. So there are certain features of the Quran. So what people have ended up with is that they have tried to replicate the Quran. Replication is not what the Quran is asking here. It's not produce something like a replica. The Quran tells us produce something which is similar to it, and which gives you the same amount of authority, the same amount of majesty, the same amount of veracity in its content. So you see, the features of the Quran the same features which the Quran has, produce some other book which has the same features. It's this challenge that is being talked about. And unfortunately, what people have generally understood is that the Quran is asking them to replicate something exactly like it, the same Arabic, or maybe different verses, but the structure of the Arabic is the same. This never was the challenge of the Quran actually. So people who are the dais or the preachers who use it for this purpose, I'm afraid they have got it wrong, unfortunately. This was specifically meant for the idolaters of Mecca and Medina, and they were the ones who said that the Prophet had fabricated it, concocted it. So they are being told that if this is a concoction from the Prophet, why don't you produce something which is similar, which has such an aura, such an ambience, such veracity, such authority, such might, such literary finesse. So all these things are encompassed in that challenge, not just the language which people have generally understood it to mean.
Good. Thank you, Barakallah. Also, you know, the An-Nas, what you mentioned is right on the spot, because many times when we address people, the people, you know, and it's the people that you're being addressed, who are being addressed at the time. So I think not only, yes, it has the alif nam in it, so there's takhsis, but you thank you very much for clarifying that. So jazakumullah khairan.
Right.
Naveed Irfan, please go ahead. Naveed Irfan, can you unmute your mic?
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम सलाम।
जी आपने जो इंटरजेक्शन का ये मीनिंग अल्तफात होता है क्या यहाँ?
Oh, iltifat means a change in addressee. It's not interjection. So iltifat is, for example, the yellow changing into green. This is an example of iltifat.
जी.
Interjection means a very, very small in-between address. Within the main address, you have a very small in-between address that is a very, very slight shift. And it is like it's not even counted as a shift.
No,
that's a completely different thing. Parenthetical sentences, there is one coming up in the next session, inshallah, we'll look at that. Parenthetical sentences are jumla mutrazas, which means that they are an on-the-spot comment regarding what has just passed. This is not a Jumla Mu'tariza.
जी, शुक्रिया.
Akram Bhatti, you may ask a question now.
Sir, जो पहले बात जो explain कर रहे थे आप वो to bring a similar surah, उसमें ये भी इस चाली में है कि Allah always said bring a surah, not verses, because surah has a arrangement, has a central theme and has a beginning and ending kind of referring to each other. So that was the purpose of telling bring a surah. I never said bring verses or bring.
Right.
I'm correct in that.
It's always the surah or the Quran itself. Like there is one place which says bring 10 concocted surahs, 10 surahs which you have, which you can do yourself.
Exactly.
So Ashara Suratin Muftariyat. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct.
Mubashir, please unmute your mic and ask a question now.
Assalamu alaikum. Sir, I have a question regarding the first paragraph. We have discussed that its addressee is Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Right.
Just like the second.
Please display the first paragraph.
Yes. Just like this, where we have a shift in the addressee, it started with Ya Ayyuhan. That means An-Nas, and then we further pinpointed what does that mean. But in the first paragraph, it starts with Alif Lam Mim Zalikal Kitab La Rayba Fi. Why it is being stated to the Prophet? Zalikal Kitab La Rayba Fi.
Why is it being stated? I mean, why is the Prophet being addressed here?
No. Why is Prophet being told this? That this is the book of God, there is no doubt in this. That is...
Now, this is something that we're going to... This is a question of tafsir, and as I said, inshallah, next time we are going to cover this question. But you see, today's session was primarily meant to train your minds to first, as I said, before even you go to the tafsir, you have to find out who the addressees are. So, I mean, the takeaway for today's session is just one, over a period of these 70 minutes, that you have learned how addressees change. Now, the question that you have asked is going to be discussed in the next session, that why is it that the Prophet is being told these, and why is it that he's the addressee, and some of the things that are being told to him are obvious and they are already understood. So what's the utility in the Prophet being informed about these things? So that's something that we're going to discuss, inshallah, in our next session. But remember, today's session was primarily tuned to the fact that, I mean, unless you are fully aware of the addressee, if you change the addressee or you misunderstand the addressee, the whole, I would say the stress on each of these verses and the paragraph would change, and we would likely end up in a wrong understanding of the passage. So the question that you have asked, inshallah, will be discussed in our next session.
It's okay, but what I was trying to convey.
So today's session, basically, if you have questions regarding the addressee, so you see, we are concentrating today entirely on the issue of addressees.
I'm coming to that point. If we have decided that some paragraph is addressed to some specific group or some specific person, then each and every statement of that paragraph must, I think, qualify that.
Yes, correct.
Okay, so we will qualify that these verses are also addressed to the Prophet. Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. We are reaching towards the end of this session, and we don't have any more questions. Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for a very enlightening session, very interactive. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next week with the next segment of Surah Baqarah. Thank you so much.